weekend in college football. I mean, that is massive news, and at some point we will need to cover it on the show. Unfortunately, I don't think it's today because we had some other stuff going on. We hawed a bit as to what we should lead with, and after a lot of debate, we came up with the Michigan-Ohio State game from this weekend as our big story. What a day Saturday in Ann Arbor. The Wolverines exercising their demons in a dominant effort against their rivals, ending an 8-game losing streak to the Bucks in emphatic fashion. A 42-27 win, Michigan's largest margin in the series since 1993, as Jim Harbaugh finally beats the Buckeyes in his 6th attempt and moves on to the Big Ten championship. It has been a while since Michigan had a moment like this one. They beat a ranked Ohio State team for the first time since 2003. They'll play for their first Big Ten title since 2004. The 11 wins are the most under Jim Harbaugh. It's just the 6th time they've won 11 in the last 115 years, and they are 3 wins away from their first national championship since that 12-win season in 1997. We're going to get into the how in just a bit here, the how it happened, the X's and O's. But I think we really need to start with the what it means. To me, that is the bigger story right now, because as we said, it's like a new reality here in the Big Ten. Nicole, you were there, and so you were able to absorb the vibe of Michigan Stadium on that day, and it really does. I think Jim Harbaugh almost, did he use the term rebirth? I mean, it feels like a beginning. A beginning. Yes, and it does feel like a new beginning.
Yeah, it does, and I think it was really cathartic for a lot of people. Obviously, everyone part of the program, but everyone, every fan, everyone who rushed that field, right? Like, it just felt cathartic to a lot of people to win, and to win that way, because I think that's what you get when you're building a program, and it's not a fluke. It's not a 4th down spot. You're building something that is sustainable. It's something that you can take great talent, you can develop it, you can win in the trenches, and you can do this year in and year out. And that's what they needed to do, because I think you need to be able to win this game, because obviously it sets up the Big Ten championships and the national championships. But it's better for everyone in the league that this is an actual rivalry and Michigan can win it.
And it's meaningful. And one of the things you think about is just how important it was for the Michigan fans and for this Michigan football team. They looked a lot like the Michigan I grew up with, like 3 yards in a cloud of dust, except for there was much more.
7.2 yards in a cloud
it was
of dust.
much more than 3 yards.
A little snow.
But just the way it happened and just the vibe, and it was, I mean, I had a chance to be there yesterday and interview a few of the players and talk with some of the coaches, and man, the way they felt about this was just, it was huge for them, because they exercised some of those demons, and they were excited about being able to take that next step and understanding what that means for the program.
I'm with you in this, Nicole. And again, look, no Ohio State fan is going to look at this and say this is good for the league, right? I mean, you always view it through your own prism. But what it does is it takes a program that historically has competed for national championships, certainly has competed for conference championships. I say this a lot. They've won more conference championships than any program in the league. It's been a while since they've competed for national championships, but it was a program that you thought of in that vein. You thought of it in the kind of globally, that it was a powerhouse program, that they could play with anybody. And they just haven't been that for a long, long time. And from the point of view of your league competing to be the best league in the country, I do think you need your historic powers to be at their best. That doesn't mean you can't have new programs and different programs compete for national championships too, right? That doesn't mean that Wisconsin, which 25 years ago or 30 years ago wasn't competing in that vein, can't be one of those teams. It doesn't mean that Iowa can't be, or whomever, right? But for the Big Ten, I think to be at its absolute best, you need Michigan to be good, because they have so much going for them historically.
No question about it. I mean, they won championships. They've been there. They've done it. And we all thought that they would be able to do it again. It's obviously just taken them a little bit longer. They've taken the long route to get to this point where they now have a chance to win a Big Ten title and compete for a national championship. But it was never a question of whether or not the resources and the talent was not there. It's always been there. They just needed to take those next steps to be able to get there, and they've gotten there now.
Yeah, and it's the reason it's big for the league is, you need that game to have everything at stake. Like it felt bigger and it felt more special because it knocked Ohio State out of the playoff race, because it was for a spot in Indy, right? Like it needs to be like that. And there's been years where it didn't have all of that riding on it because Michigan wasn't, one game away from that.
Right.
So I think that's where it is really significant. And yes, you're just carrying the flag for the conference. In an era, if there's an expanded playoff, these are teams that are going to be in there. But you did need someone to get up there, because we've talked so many times on this show about, every time in the wake of the Penn State game or Michigan State or Michigan, it's like, oh, well, there's the talent gap and there's the gap and there's the gap. And so for someone to close the gap and to do it in an emphatic way, I think was really important. Plus, they won the game in the way that Ohio State has beaten them. Yes. I think that was also part of what was cathartic about the way that they won the game.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to think about it. Again, I think we have to just call it what it is. You have to put it in terms of you're competing with the SEC. The SEC has been dominant in college football. And think about, since Michigan last won a Big Ten championship, 2004, think about the SEC teams that have won national championships, right? Florida, LSU, Alabama, Auburn,
yeah,
right? I mean, so you
not
have,
just one,
right? So you have multiple teams that are competing. And again, that's not to say, look, Michigan State made the playoff. I believe in an expanded playoff, there will be a lot of West teams that can be in that conversation too. Certainly Penn State believes it can be in that conversation. It didn't just have to be Michigan. Yeah. But if Michigan isn't in that conversation, it hampers the Big Ten's ability to compete on that highest level when you are just putting it kind of all in the lap of Ohio State, which, absent the one time that Michigan State made it, is what has happened for the Big Ten. So that's what it means for the league. What does it mean for Jim Harbaugh?
Well, it means everything, because this is what you came back for, right? You came back to beat Ohio State and to win Big Ten championships, and you knew if you do both of those things, you're going to be in the mix for national championships.
Right. And I think the other thing that's important to this, when you talk about what it means for Jim Harbaugh, is what Warren Manuel has done from the athletic department standpoint. To go in and say, hey, we're going to rework this contract. We're going to, this is going to be friendly for both of us, but you've got things to prove. Jim Harbaugh knew he had things to prove. I always say this. There's always external pressure that's put on coaches and players, but any coach worth their salt knows what those pressures are. And they go home every night knowing what's at stake. And I think Jim Harbaugh is no different. And I go back to media day, and I asked him this. I said, you look a lot happier than you looked in this setting before. And he's like, no. And when we get a chance to talk to him again, I'm going to bring that pun up again, because he has been. He's looked like a different coach all year. His team has been significantly different from what they've been in the past. And his team, his players and coaches admit to that. Yeah. This is a different team. So he adjusted the way he coaches. He made staff changes, and you have to evolve as a coach. And he's done that. And he's proven that you given the opportunity, you can take those next steps and not just start to win games, but put your team back in a situation where they can win championships.
That's what I think is really cool about this, because we're in this era where everyone's firing their coaches after 2 seasons now. We had multiple 2-season coaches. We have 3 seasons. People are so impatient. And I think it's incredible that he restructured a contract to stay at his alma mater, overhauled the staff, said, I'm going to evaluate everything that we do and question everything that we do to make sure we're doing it right. And it worked, because so often we see people just change the head man. And they did it. He did it. He was willing to change these things and figure out what they needed to do to be different. And it's not easy. It's not easy to do that. He has been different. He has been different. And to again, hire different people, maybe some that you didn't work with, some that are just a little bit the comfort isn't there. It's not the guys you've had for a number of years, but to make those changes and do it and for it to work is significant. And to be willing to say, I will take a restructured contract to stay here, to make it work. The incentives are for the things that we want to do, to win the games that we think we can do, to reach where we want to be. And it's just remarkable because it's a patience, it's a trust, it's a willingness to change that you just don't see in college football.
Yeah, I'm with you. I do think getting out of your comfort zone is really important in life. And that he was willing to do that, I think, speaks volumes. And it's not as if they haven't had the talent. I mean, I think that's where it's been frustrating, right? I mean, you look at the last 2 drafts, they've had 18 players drafted. That's the 4th most in the country. They went 11-8 over the last 2 years. So it's not like they didn't have players. They had players that teams at the next level wanted. They just hadn't figured out how to fit them together and succeed. And that's what coaching is. It's how do we take what we have, and they have a lot of resources financially and in terms of the facilities and all those things, but also in terms of players and their ability to get players. And how do we take that and mold it into a really competitive team? Yeah. And so now, guys, they are sitting pretty. They are in really, really good shape. Essentially what it comes down to now for the college football playoff is they simply need to win one more game. If they beat Iowa, they are into the CFP. Let's look at the rankings from a week ago. They will undoubtedly move into the top 4 when the rankings are announced tomorrow. They'll probably be number 2.
Makes sense.
I would put them at 2.
Yeah, I would think so. Georgia and Cincinnati both won convincingly this week. Alabama, of course, snuck by a mediocre Auburn team in 4 overtimes. Notre Dame and Oklahoma State still very much in this discussion. You probably have 6 teams still in the conversation. Again, simple path for Michigan. Let's take Michigan first. You beat Iowa, and unquestionably you are in, right?
Yes.
I think the question is just kind of, you probably can't get to number 1 unless Georgia were to lose, right? Georgia's going to be number 1. But to me, 2, I mean, 2 seems very reasonable, right?
Yeah, I think 2 is right, especially we've seen the way the committee has viewed Michigan, right? After they lost, they didn't fall very far, and they put them ahead of Michigan State.
Right.
To be fair, they did say they were a very complete team. We did see that. They were right. Okay, I was mad at them for the way that they did the rankings, but I will let them. They were correct on this point. But, they had Ohio State in that spot last week. The committee clearly has had a lot of respect for the top Big Ten team. So beating the number 2, I think you replace them. I don't think number 1 is in play unless Georgia loses, but I think that's a pretty great spot to be in. You would get, you start to think about the national championship.
Let's get into who you'd get.
That's
right?
true.
Yeah.
It might be Cincinnati.
It could be Cincinnati.
Right. Okay. So what do we think is going to happen here? I mean, to me, the path for, well, first of all, let's just talk about Alabama for a second. Okay. I mean, they were very fortunate to beat Auburn, who frankly just isn't very good. I mean, there were several occasions where they were 1 play away from losing. If they beat Georgia, they're going to be in. Right? I mean, they're going to be the SEC champs, and so I get it. But I would say, and maybe you guys disagree, I think you put to rest any notion
they're out.
They make it as a 2-loss.
If they lose, they're out. They're out. You would have to be convincing. You would have to be playing a way that the committee says you're one of the best teams in the country, unquestionably. And they would not do that. So, no, they're out. I think you're right with you said 6, because I think you can talk about 4 teams that'll probably be in there this week. And then, Oklahoma State is lurking. And Notre Dame is lurking.
Yeah. I don't see
But I think Alabama falls
I know
out.
you somewhat disagree with me. I don't see any way the committee can put Notre Dame ahead of Cincinnati. I just don't see how you can Not
Not this week.
Well, if you don't do it this week,
Notre
Dame's not playing.
I understand that. I still just believe that when it comes down to when they decide who the 4 best teams are, I understand what Cincinnati has done.
Right.
And full disclosure, I've got a dog in the race in Notre Dame.
I understand, but you've always been very fair about this, right?
I still believe that when they go into that room for that last vote, if there is a way for Notre Dame to be there legitimately, that there are going to be some other data points other than the head-to-head, I think they sneak in. And that's
ahead of Cincinnati. I think they could make it.
As 4.
But I think the discussion is between them and Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
I don't see how the discussion... Now, unless, obviously, if Cincinnati loses to Houston, they're done.
Yeah.
If they go 4 overtimes against Houston...
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you could make a case maybe for if they're not convincing.
I think this is just a great place for where college football is right now. Right. You have a group of 5 that has done everything that they were supposed to do.
Yes.
And they're still within striking distance and still, by all accounts, even though I'm saying that there's going to be a team that would be ahead of them, they're in a great spot. And Luke Fickell has done an unbelievable job with that program, building up to get them to where they are right now. And the only reason I'm going to keep talking about them is because there are Big Ten ties there. So it's okay. So we can talk about them. But it's going to be fascinating. This is going to be fun. But I absolutely agree when we start to talk about Alabama, they lose, they have to be out.
I agree totally about where the sport is right now. The fact that you have matchups in the Big Ten championship game, ACC and Pac-12 that you would not have, not Pac-12, Big 12,
Big 12,
that you would not have predicted before the season is really a sign of health for the sport. We've talked about needing new blood. But I would say Cincinnati's in great shape. The committee said last week, this schedule, we think you're one of the 4 best. So I think I'm with you, Dave, that I think if Notre Dame were to get in the mix, it would be behind Cincinnati. I think that head-to-head would come into play, and they could both make it at 3 and 4. But I think Michigan, there could be such a clear drop-off between 1, 2, and then 3, 4.
I think there is.
That's why it's really important if Michigan were to get that 2 seed.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I absolutely think if they do end up in the 2 seed, almost regardless of who else gets in there, how it shakes out, I think they're really good position to play for a national championship.
No doubt. And that's all you want to do at the end of the day, right, is be in that position and make that happen. Right. And listen, being in the top 4 gives you that opportunity. But for Michigan to be 2, it's a better opportunity.
Yeah. I think if Cincinnati wins, the only scenario I see is if Alabama were to win.
Yes.
Right?
Steal a spot, essentially.
And steal a spot, right? If the SEC ends up with 2, that's the only way I think if Cincinnati wins
and
this thing.
Oklahoma State wins.
Yeah, and wins reasonably convincingly.
Yeah.
You know what's scary to me about this Alabama whole situation is Nick Saban has been as happy as he could be after mediocre wins. I mean, the psychology.
You feel like he knows something we don't know.
No, I think he knows that the team isn't as good as they usually are. He's like actually enjoying surprising wins. I genuinely think that's what's happening.
Big Ten announcing 2 major award winners today. Congratulations to Malcolm Jenkins, outstanding safety, Ohio State All-American. He's had a tremendous NFL career. He wins the Dungy Thomas Humanitarian Award. He's been incredibly involved in charitable causes in the community, an activist particularly dedicated to helping young people in underserved communities. And former Wisconsin star turned AD Pat Richter, the winner of the Ford Kinnick Leadership Award, great NFL career, transformed Wisconsin's athletic department, struggling mightily when he took over as AD, and of course has become an athletic powerhouse. We'll announce the Big Ten postseason award winners for football starting tomorrow on our show. So keep it here on Big Ten Today. Back to Michigan's historic win over Ohio State. Wolverines putting up 42 points in the victory, the most they have scored against the Bucks since Harry Truman was in the White House, and the 4th most ever. Did it by dominating the line of scrimmage and running the football. They threw 4 passes in the second half. I think we have to start there. And Howard, that's what really stood out to me as we sat in the green room not far from here as a group and watched this game unfold, was the manner in which, really on both sides, but let's start offensively, the manner in which Michigan dominated the line of scrimmage. I mentioned before 7.2 yards a carry. The most staggering statistic to me of all was Ohio State, 0 tackles for losses. The furthest we've been able to go back is 2005 to search box scores. It's the first time since 2005 Ohio State had a game without a single tackle for loss.
I think one of the things that Ohio State is grappling with the last couple of days is just how soft they were in this game.
Yeah.
And that's probably being kind, because what Michigan did to them was, I've never seen an Ohio State team dominated like that at the line of scrimmage, where, there are plays where, Haskins is running through the middle and it's almost like nobody wants to even be anywhere near him. And unfortunately for Ohio State, that goes to just how much they wanted the individual players to be in a rivalry game and to be dominated the way they were in this one.
They looked slow. They struggled to get there. I mean, we were trying to figure this out before the game. I mean, I saw a stat that it was over 200 of the rushing yards were before contact. Like, it felt that way. Yeah. So that could very well be true. And I think Haskins himself had like at least 100 yards before contact, which is incredible. The offensive line was phenomenal. I was listening to a podcast that listed all of their names, like started the podcast just saying all of their names, like, you know, to commemorate it, because it was an incredible effort and it was just pure domination. Like that was a word that Harbaugh used after the game. There really wasn't any other way to say that because, you know, that's what they did. They dominated every single play. We saw this offense early in the season and we said, are they going to be able to win a game if they just run the ball? Well, it sets a tone. There was a reason this program was so happy about those games, right? When they were barely throwing, because they wanted to be able to do this when it mattered the most, and it completely changed the game. They controlled the game, and they controlled the second half when it never felt like Ohio State was back in it, even when they were in one score late.
Because they couldn't stop them.
Couldn't stop
them. They
them.
had zero chance of stopping them. It's amazing. They only got to third down 8 times in the game. 8 third downs. And I guess, I mean, it wasn't even, you know, it's one thing to say that in the end they were able to grind out long drives, but they were gashing them. I mean, these were gashed long drives where they, again, didn't have to throw the football. I mean, that's staggering in and of itself. And just so much more physical. And to your point, Nicole, I think at the beginning of the year we said, can Michigan win games like this? And the answer turned out to be yes. Now, they became more multidimensional as the year went on, but what they did was they set the tone. They believed in camp they could be a dominant run team, and essentially they used those first few games to test the theory, right? And then they kind of added different ingredients to the recipe as they went along to make themselves a more complete football team. But I think this game was won in a lot of ways those first few weeks when they realized we can gash people. Now, we'll have to figure out a way if someone slows us down to beat them, but we got a dominant run game.
In talking with them yesterday, I asked the question, when did you know that you'd be able to have this type of performance? They said when we watched them against Oregon. For me, when I go back and I think about the Oregon game, I was more dialed into the quarterback play, right? How that was stressing Ohio State's defense. But they said, no. Yeah, that was part of it. But it was about the way they were handled physically up front. That's when we knew. Because for them, for both programs, they know that how big this game is. Every week you're also building toward your rival. And they knew that they just kept running the football the way they did, that they would be prepared for this particular game. The other thing that came out was how we talked about, well, whether you could throw it or not. They always believed that they could throw it and knew that they could throw it, but they didn't have to. So they were going to win the games and continue to be methodical on the ground. It was almost like they walked away from, when we talk about these spread offenses, being able to get the ball out on the perimeter, it's almost like they said, you know what, we can spread our guys out, but we're going to control the line of scrimmage. And we're still going to run the ball and be effective. And Haskins is, I mean, he is unbelievable. I could only imagine, I should say, that he'd probably be in the middle of this Heisman race if he didn't have Blake running with him as well. Because together, obviously, they take the ball away from each other. But both of those players and the way Haskins is put together, oh my, he's a load.
What's crazy about what you just said about the Oregon game is that was RPOs, that was going to the left. We talked so much about that. It was just getting guys in space. It was a totally different way to expose that Ohio State defense. And Kayvon Thibodeau didn't play in that game, right? Like there would have been a ton of opportunities or inspiration or whatever you want to take from it if you're Michigan looking at that game. But I also think Jim Harbaugh talked about this after the game, that he knew in spring ball that the offensive line was going to be able to do this, that it was going to come together and be like this. I mean, how many future pros are on that line? Every position? All of them? I mean, it was really phenomenal. So I think you see these pieces, and that's why they were looser. That's why they were the way that they were leading into the season, that we were all like, something feels different. Something feels different.
I'd say this. The other thing, one of the other things I picked up too while I was there, you talk about how big the magnitude of the rivalry, right? And I got the sense that this entire year, going back to the spring, is when they talked about this, this game was important, but their goal was trying to be in position to win a national title. And they knew they had to go through Ohio State to get there. So it wasn't Ohio State being the destination. they knew that was on the path and on the road that if they wanted to reach their goals and what they wanted to do, they had to go through an Ohio State team, and they recognized that.
That was a pretty big hill along the way, right? I mean, if you're charting out your map, right, you're in the covered wagon. You say,
or their case, the submarine.
Yeah, or the submarine, right? Hey, we got a little something we're going to need to scale before we get there. I don't know what you do when you're in the submarine when you have something. You got some landmines.
Yeah, you got some
sea mines or whatever it is. Anyway, I'm showing my lack of nautical knowledge here. But what about the other side of the ball? Because I think when we came into this game, we all said the way for Michigan to win this game is to disrupt the pass game. That was where Michigan had the obvious advantage, was the two end rushers who are fabulous, right, and who proved how fabulous they are. I mean, I think you guys probably both saw the Pro Football Focus deal on Aiden Hutchinson. It's 15 pressures in this game, which is the most since they started charting 7 years ago. I mean, he absolutely ate Ohio State's offensive line for lunch. And Ojabo was there too, but it felt like Hutchinson was the guy who just totally disrupted it.
And let's not forget the false starts.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, right?
What was it, 5?
Yeah.
At least 5 of those.
It was just so obvious that he was in their heads.
It really, the way they did it on the defensive side, and we talked about this, it would have to be the quick game, get the ball out really quickly to keep the quarterback comfortable. But also was sending a linebacker as well. So now you force that running back to pick up a linebacker as opposed to trying to help out and chip. But I thought you saw Ohio State try to play a game in space that really you couldn't play against this defense. And they have some soul searching to figure out when they look at the game plan, because they didn't run the ball and do it enough to really get those guys off of them and force them to play the run as well. But what they did defensively was amazing. And again, you think about it, you got first-time defense coordinator at Michigan that's coming in from the pros, and bring Clinksdale over, who was the pass game coordinator from Kentucky, and they figure this thing out. And again, they have been playing so well the entire year. Yeah, they give up plays, but they really, as a whole, as a group, was outstanding.
Yeah, it was one of those moments where, when we say stuff and sometimes we look right, like we said, right? These are game-wrecking pass rushers, and C.J. Stroud hasn't played as well when he's been under pressure, and he's had to, really make decisions quickly and not as comfortably as, let's say, against Michigan State or wherever. And we were right. I mean, that was where the game was won, and Aiden Hutchinson was clearly the best player on the field. He impacted almost every single play. I was glad David Ojabo got a sack at the end because he deserved it. He was right there all the time, right? But he finally got one at the end. But, it was just, I thought it was really fitting that Hutchinson, set the program record, single season sacks, 13 on the season. I mean, in this game, because he was the best player in the biggest game of the year, the biggest game in a decade for this program. And that's where he did it, because he was so disruptive. It was exactly that. And then that's what you do. You have 3 elite receivers out there. They gave up some big plays, but that's how you have to attack that. You have to put pressure on the guy throwing the ball. And again, they weren't really running it or whatever, but you're not going to necessarily be able to handle if they get the ball to those guys in space all the time. You have to cover them, but pressure the guy who's throwing it, and they did it so well. It totally disrupted the game and anything that Ohio State was trying to do.
Yeah. Football games are won on the line of scrimmage, period. That is where they are won, and it is hard to remember a team the caliber of Ohio State being dominated to the degree they were on both lines of scrimmage. I mean, this was a line of scrimmage game. One team could run it, the other team couldn't run it. One team could get to the passer, the other team couldn't, and that's your game. I mean, NCAA volleyball tournament bracket announced last night. The Big Ten has been the best conference in the country all season, and it played out on Selection Sunday. 8 teams earning spots, the most of any conference. Tourney gets underway on Thursday at campus sites. The Final Four in Columbus, December 16th and 18th. Crazy couple days for Iowa. They rallied from 15 points down to top Nebraska 28-21 Friday. Their largest comeback in a conference game in a quarter of a century, and sat home and watched on Saturday as Minnesota won the Axe for just the second time in the last 18 seasons, a 10-point win over Wisconsin. The combination of those two results sending the Hawkeyes to Indy for just the second time ever. And it really is quite a remarkable story, right? So you have a team that got as high as number 2 in the country, and then it kind of crumbled. I mean, back-to-back weeks against Purdue and Wisconsin, they did not look good, and then figured out a way to right the ship and find themselves back playing for a Big Ten championship, trying to win one for the first time since 2004. What stands out to you about how they turned it around?
Just the fact that, they could stay so steady, even in the face of adversity, being able to recalibrate and get the team back focused when they had some of those issues. And, you have to give the coaching staff and those players a lot of credit to be able to rebound the way they did all year.
They changed quarterbacks. They changed back quarterbacks. The defense had games where they didn't get the takeaways, and then they did. I mean, they stayed true to ultimately who they are, I think, throughout. And, that comeback against Nebraska, I mean, it just crushing for Nebraska that they continue to lose games this way. But it was all the stuff that Iowa is known for, special teams, defense. It was those types of plays that put them in that position. And I don't know, what do you do? Do you send like a fruit basket to PJ Fleck? Kirk Ferentz? Like, what do you do when you're at home and you get to watch somebody take care of business for you and you get added? Like, you send something?
I know. You think about just the incredible discomfort, right, of being an Iowa fan and just pulling passionately for Minnesota
of all
right, which is a rival, although, of course, Wisconsin's a rival, too, so maybe there's some schadenfreude involved there.
I always wonder what that's like, to watch something totally out of your control that decides that.
Yeah, no doubt. No, it's totally fascinating. And then there's this flu bug going through the Iowa team, so they didn't want to get everyone together to watch the game because they felt like we don't necessarily want everyone in a room together. So everyone was kind of in their own places watching it. It's a pretty remarkable story. And so now they do find themselves, after winning these 4 straight very narrow games, now up against Michigan and trying to do something that no Big Ten West team has done since we redid this format, and that is win the Big Ten championship game. The East has won it every time since we've gone to East and West, and Michigan will certainly go in as a significant favorite, I would think, in this game. So what's Iowa's formula to compete here?
I think they have to be able to run the ball. We know they struggled with that all year, but I think you still have to be committed to doing that. We know how tough they play on the defensive side. This doesn't appear, at first blush, that this is going to be a game where Michigan's going to just throw it all around the park, so it doesn't mean you're going to get a lot of turnovers in this one. But I love the matchup. It's going to be a really physical game, and it's going to be one of those things that Iowa just has to stay true to who they are and not try to get too fancy, because this is going to be a good one.
Yeah, I think you're right absolutely about running the ball. And we've said this for a long time because, if they don't know which quarterback is going to be playing in this game yet. But we just saw a really good quarterback in C.J. Stroud really struggle with these pass rushers, right? So you got to get the ground game going, something reliable that's a little bit less stressful, and just try to get in the middle of this defense, because that's what's going to give you an opportunity, because we've seen Iowa struggle offensively against defenses that are not as good as Michigan. So that's going to be, a real uphill battle, I think, for Iowa.
They're 10013th in the nation in yards per carry.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's going to be a problem.
Oh, they're bad.
Either way. Like, whatever is happening offensively is going to be hard.
They do not run the ball well. There are only 7 teams in the nation that punted more than Iowa.
But Tyler Goodson's good.
He is good.
Yeah, they should be able to run the ball.
The issues are up front.
Right.
I mean, they just haven't, other than Tyler Linderbaum, they just haven't been able to open up holes for him. He is very good.
Yeah. It's going to be hard. Whatever yards they gain, it will be hard fought.
Yeah. They have 9 scrimmage touchdowns in the last 6 games combined. I mean, it is a serious uphill battle for them, but you know what? They relish the opportunity to get a chance and to prove absolutely everyone wrong. I remember Joel Klatt saying something very funny to me earlier this year. He said, I feel like at the end of the year, I'm going to see Kirk Ferentz hoisting the national championship trophy, which is probably not a possibility at this point. But let's substitute the Big Ten championship trophy, and I'm going to be saying this isn't sustainable. So he's 60 minutes away from doing just that. Yeah. What about Wisconsin? What do you make of the Badgers having it right there in front of them and not being able to seize it?
Well, it's been a tough year for them all year, right? The inconsistencies that they've played with on the offensive side of the football, just really reared its ugly head once again. And I think ultimately they just have to get to a point where they can be as consistent as they need to be in the pass game. We know they got the running game going, but they struggled early with that. They look like that they have the components there to continue to move forward. They just have have to get more consistency out of the quarterback position.
Yeah, I think there's no other way to say it. It was just disappointing. Yeah. I mean, they had it for the taking. They controlled their own destiny, and they didn't win the game. But, I will say it kind of snuck up on me as we got to the end of the season. Minnesota, 8 wins. Purdue, 8 wins.
Yeah.
Like, there were some really good seasons out of the West. So it wasn't necessarily a cakewalk for Wisconsin, certainly, and it wasn't going to be against Minnesota. But, again, when you control your own destiny heading into the final weekend,
that's what you want.
It's disappointing when you don't win it.
Think about how close Minnesota was to playing in this game, right? I mean, had Iowa not put together this borderline miraculous comeback, again, they had a comeback this big in a conference game in 25 years. Had that not happened, Minnesota is playing in Indy.
Mentioned speaks volumes to what's happening in the West.
Right? They've done a really good job, and you're right. Purdue had a great year.